Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Gail Roden, and as Sherry told you, I am an assessment consultant with Pearson. I can hardly believe it, but I've been doing that for 20 years. Prior to that, I worked in a private practice. I'm a neuropsychologist, and I did nothing but assessment. So the WAIS and I are old friends, and I'll leave the old part dangling. But this is not the first WAIS that I have worked on, and it's really exciting to see all the changes that have come over the years. This is going to be an overview. We're going to take a 30,000 foot view of the WAIS because I want to tempt you actually, because we have 3 more of these webinars coming up, each a half hour, and each will dig a little deeper into an important area of the test. So today we're going to take a look at all the important components, the things you want to be aware of, and then my job is to make you interested enough that you'll come back and listen to the following ones as well. Here's a list of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the updated norms. We're going to talk about changes in administration time, new test structure, and some new subtests that make up that structure. We're going to take a look at which group studies, special group studies, were done. We're going to talk about expanded clinical utility, improved user experience, and then, as I mentioned, I will give you details about those upcoming webinars. And I'm also going to share with you some additional resources that you can use in the meantime to learn more about WAIS-5. So let's start by talking about updated norms. Most of you, I'm sure, have heard about the Flynn effect. And one interpretation of the Flynn effect is that people are getting smarter. I don't know. Think about the people you know. I'll think about the people I know. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. But what does appear in the literature, and quite consistently, is that every 10 years we see about a 3-point increase in full-scale IQ scores. And that's not limited to one test, but just in general. So if you think about the fact that the WAIS-4 was published in 2008, well, you do the math, and you'll see that we've got quite a few years in there, 16 if my math is right. And think about the fact that these older tests may tend to overestimate some of your clients' scores. So one of the most important reasons we update tests and revise tests, particularly tests of cognitive ability, is because we want to be sure that we're comparing today's clients with today's population. And today's population is represented by the normative samples that were gathered for the WAIS in 2023 and 2024. And they reflect recent societal shifts and trends. Demographics, of course, is one important thing. We know the demographics of the United States are quite different now than they were 16 years ago. But also, if you think of things just like vocabulary, the language that's used, words that people are familiar with. Also, the internet. We interact with people in different ways. So we have all these things, plus we've matched the normative sample on 5 key demographic variables to the most recent census. So you can feel confident that you are going to be having a comparison now that's up to date. Let's talk about administration time. If all you need to do is gather a full-scale IQ, it's going to take you about 45 minutes to do that. And it says it requires 7 subtests. Now that means there are 7 subtests that contribute to the full-scale IQ. But being full disclosure, there's one more subtest you need to administer, and that's digits forward. Digits forward will not contribute to the full-scale IQ, but the way the test was normed, digits forward was always given prior to digit sequencing. And so we're going to give it exactly the same way when we're in a clinical situation as was done when we were deriving the normative sample. If you need to get the primary index scales, all 5 of them, in addition to the full scale IQ, it's going to take you right about an hour. And it will require 10 subtests because there are 2 subtests for each primary index scale. Now, some of you may have thought, 5 index scales? Was that a mistake on her part? She's talking about WAIS-5, 5 index scales. Nope, that's another big change. The test structure, the full scale IQ, okay, there are now 5 primary index scales. What you used to know as perceptual reasoning on WAIS-4 has been broken down into 2 separate scales, visual spatial and fluid reasoning. And those of you who are familiar with the WISC know this. You've been working with this structure for a while, this 5-factor structure, but it's finally going to be appearing on the WAIS as well, which is nice to have that continuity. And we know that these 2 scales are actually measuring different things. So if you look under each of the 5 scales, you'll see in blue the subtests that are required to give it in order to get full scale IQ. Those in black are available for substitution, but you want to be careful and read the line at the bottom. Only 1 substitution is permitted when you're deriving a full scale IQ. The reason for that is once we get beyond 1 subtest that's different than what the normative sample got, then we've moved too far away from making a comparison. Okay, so 1 substitution allowed when you're getting a full scale IQ. Now let's take a look at those 5 primary index scales. Same thing, we're reminding you that perceptual reasoning is now two scales, visuospatial and fluid reasoning. Under each of these scales, you see in blue the 2 subtests that are required to get the primary index scale. And here, very importantly, subtest substitution is not permitted for any of the primary index scores. So if you've made a substitution to get your full scale, that's fine. You can report your full scale. But the primary index scale on which you made the substitution, you cannot calculate a score for that scale. Now, you can still get qualitative information from the subtest you did give. As you saw, there are subtests available for substitution. You can give those if you want to get more information, dig deeper in that area. But just remember, you can't substitute on these and get a quantitative score. Let's dig just a little deeper here into these 2 primary index scales, the new ones, the visual spatial and the fluid reasoning. I like to think of them in terms of the skills that are needed to do well on each of these and what type of job or what type of employment would require these skills. So for the visual spatial index, I think of the skills that you need to be a good architect. You need to be able to take visual information and use it to build a geometric design that matches a model. You're shown all the information you need to solve these problems. Block design and visual puzzles are the 2 subtests that are going to make up this index. And if you think about it, all the information you need is there. You look at it, you have to make yours look just like this, okay? So there's your architect. Now, if we move over to fluid reasoning, these are the skills needed by a detective. Again, we're going to present visual information, but your job now as a client is to identify a common theme or concept, or to figure out what the rule is for taking that visual information and coming up with the correct answer. So matrix reasoning, figure weights, think of the fact that you have to select the correct answer. It's not just shown to you as a model and you have to make something that looks just like it. You've got to figure out what's the rule and then apply it to select the correct answer. Here's a busy slide for you. Here's our new test structure in terms of the ancillary index scales. And there are a lot of them. And this is going to be one of the great strengths of this test, particularly if you're working with some of our special groups, if you do neuropsychological evaluations, these are going to be extremely helpful. First, take a look across the top here. These columns represent the primary index scales. So the 5 that you saw, each one has an expanded scale. So you can give more subtests, dig deeper, and you can also take a look at different aspects of the construct that you're testing. What subtests under verbal expanded did they do well on? Which ones did they have trouble with? What are the differences between those two tests that might account for the fact that they did better on some than others? So it's really going to help us understand where strengths and weaknesses are. Under verbal comprehension, we also have a verbal reasoning subtest. Under the fluid reasoning, we also have a quantitative reasoning index scale. And if you look under working memory, you'll see that we have a whole host of things. The first thing, in addition to the expanded working memory, is we've broken down visual and auditory, so you can get separate scaled scores. And then within the auditory working memory, we have registration, that is subtests that look at how well your client is able to take in the information and hold it in working memory. And then also manipulation. Once the information is in there, how well or how poorly do they do in terms of manipulating it, transforming it, doing whatever they have to do to it to get the correct answer. So you're going to get a lot of information on working memory, which is super important because we know that working memory contributes to many of the disabilities and difficulties that bring people to our offices for testing. Let's go all the way over here to the right now, and you'll see that, of course, we have a GAI, a general ability scale. And what this is all about, I think of this as the horsepower in someone's brain. What's under the hood? How well can they reason and problem solve with some fairly difficult tasks? On the other hand, cognitive proficiency, which goes along with general ability, this is looking at working memory and processing speed. These are the more fundamental tools that the brain uses to do the reasoning and problem solving under the general ability index. We also have a nonverbal scale, and this is excellent for folks who have language difficulties or for whom English is not their first language. Now, it's not a totally nonverbal scale. It's not like the Wechsler nonverbal, for example, but the client does not have to provide any oral responses, and we have minimized the amount of oral directions, instructions that are there. So we've minimized the effect that language is going to have on scores. Similarly, over here, we have a non-motor scale. And this is excellent. We also have a reduced motor processing speed. But I'm going to talk basically about non-motor. This is for folks who have difficulty using their upper extremities. Maybe they have a tremor, maybe they have a broken arm, maybe they have muscle weakness, whatever. So this is a great scale to have here. Notice that it includes naming speed quantity, which was a task that was not on WAIS-4, but is on WAIS-5, and is really going to help you because it's a way to look at processing speed without any motor usage at all. Now, there's one more important thing to know about the non-motor scale. It's also available to use for remote administration. Excuse me. So if you're doing telehealth assessments, this is going to be a very important scale for you and one you want to feel familiar with and comfortable with using. Well, to fit in all that good stuff, we have to say goodbye to some subtests. The two that we've selected to remove are picture completion and cancellation. Picture completion, as it turns out, the construct is not as representative of the visual spatial ability that we now have on one of our primary index scales as the other subtests on that scale. We want to decrease the emphasis on speed, and we've also found that it isn't frequently used. So it was kind of a no-brainer that that was the one we were going to remove. Cancellation, turns out, has a very low G loading and a low correlation with the other processing speed tasks. Also, it's not particularly clinically sensitive in adults. So again, there are other measures of visual neglect in adults that do a better job than cancellation. It's good with kids, it's going to stick around on the whisk, but it's gone from the WAIS. It's also, excuse me, it's also part of our plan to have that motor-free processing speed measure where we use the quantitative speed and instead. We say goodbye, but we also say hello. And here are the 5 new subtests that are available on the WAIS-5. And for each of those, I've indicated the index score that it will contribute to. Set relations, you'll hear more about these next week when Cliff talks with you. Running digits on working memory. Naming speed quantity, that non-motor processing speed index subtest. And then we have 2 subtests that are going to contribute just to ancillary index scales. There also have been on the WIMS, but now you're going to see them on the WAIS-5. So again, lots more information on these next week. Here are the group studies that were done. We looked at the 2 extremes of intellectual ability, so intellectually gifted individuals and those with intellectual disabilities, both mild and moderate. We have 2 specific learning disorder groups, one for reading, one for math. Excuse me. We have an ADHD group, an autism spectrum disorder group. We have TBI, moderate or severe, mild cognitive impairment, which is typically something we see with our older clients, and then probable dementia of the Alzheimer's type, mild severity. Now, for these last 3, these are difficulties where you may think about giving the WAIS more than once over time, or at least some of the subtests or some of the scales. You might want to see is there improvement in someone who's had a traumatic brain injury? Is there greater impairment now going on with those who have a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment or probable Alzheimer's dementia? We have expanded clinical utility. As I've mentioned, we have broader construct coverage in the areas of working memory, fluid reasoning, and processing speed. We have those new expanded index scores that really help you more clearly interpret where the difficulties are coming into play for your clients. And we have the new index scales that reduce the confounds of expressive language and motor problems, and that also give us an ideal scale for telehealth assessments. So we have the nonverbal index, the non-motor index, also good for remote testing, and the motor reduced processing speed index. We've improved the user experience. We've simplified administration, and we've simplified the scoring directions. I think most people will be very glad that we've done that. We also have multiple options for administration, scoring, and reporting. We have traditional, what we call P&P, or paper and pencil kits. You can still score by hand, or you can do what we call a hybrid administration, where you use a paper and pencil kit, and you use Q Global to do your scoring and your report generation. The other option is to use Q Interactive. Some of you are probably already using it. If you are, then The WAIS-5 is going to magically appear when it publishes, which is really wonderful. You will have to buy some additional response materials and a template, but everything else, everything you need on the iPads is just going to show up, and you'll never have to buy a record form, and scoring and reporting are included in Q Interactive. So no worries about paying for that or having to renew it. You just renew your Q Interactive license every year, and you'll continue to have the test. We have multiple training options, and there's even something new since I put this slide in here. These are the paid training options. You see there's a live webinar that lasts 3 hours, and you can have up to 40 folks involved in that. And there's also an hour-long virtual question and answer session. The 3-hour session, is designed for folks who don't have any information, any knowledge of the test. It's going to get you started. It's going to teach you the basics, how to do it, how to administer, score, and interpret. On the other hand, the 1 hour is a Q&A session, and this is intended for folks who have given the test, who've seen the test, who have some familiarity with it, enough that they have questions. Am I doing this correctly? What do I do if I got responses I wasn't expecting? What should I do with them? All of these in the question and answer. You can purchase all of these now. The training dates will begin October 1st. So first come, first serve. Purchase now and get your training later. And I also want to mention that when you purchase a kit, you're going to get introductory free testing instructions. You're going to get modules that get you started, get you familiar with the test, and get you going. And those are free. Here are some additional resources. No need, obviously, to copy all this down. They're easy enough to find. There's a WAIS-5 web page on our website. There's a tab in there for a WAIS-5 FAQ, and that's being added to all the time. As we get questions come in, we're enlarging that and making it more and more useful. Be sure to look at the FAQ. You can also sign up to stay in the know about WAIS-5. And this will allow you to get emails periodically. There are blogs to keep you up to date with what's going on. And finally, you may want to find your Pearson assessment consultant. Could be me, depending on what state you're in, or could be one of my colleagues. And the assessment consultants can help you decide whether you want to use paper and pencil, you want to use Q Interactive, what questions you have about the test. And there are separate folks who work with K-12, clinical education, and folks who work with those who are in healthcare, which includes universities, hospitals, and private practitioners. Oops. There we go. Let's make this big. Okay, we've done this. And here's what I promised you in the beginning, the upcoming sessions, additional details. Next week on the 21st, you're going to get a deeper dive into the new subtests. The following week on the 29th, much more information on those ancillary index scales. And then finally on June 5th, identifying clinical subgroups using the WAIS-5. So now I think we have just a few minutes left, but we can use those to answer your questions. I'll do my best, and where I get stuck, I have lots of my colleagues available back screen to help. So fire away.
Thank you so much, Gail. The first question that we got in is for the digital platforms, if you're going to use Q Global, is there any software separately that you need to purchase?
Yes, the Q Global account itself doesn't cost anything. You'll get a Q Global. If you don't already have a Q Global account, it'll be set up for you when you purchase your first digital asset to go on there. And what you can purchase is either individual scoring, administration, and reports, or you can purchase a 1-year subscription that will allow you to score as many WAIS-5s as you like for a full year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We also got a question in about QI and when the starter kits will be available for purchase on QI, or when they'll be available for customers to order.
I'm going to ask for a little help with this one because
Sure.
I'm thinking it may be a little bit later than the paper and pencil kits.
Yep.
Help me,
So,
Erin.
yep, I'll go ahead on this one and let you know so they will be available this fall shortly after the release. So plan on those being available to order in September for those of our QI users out there today.
Great. Thank you.
We had another question come in if we are planning an update to the WIMS as well.
We are. And 2024 is the year of the WAIS. 2025, we hope, will be the year of the WIMS. Of course, we always say hope because you know how test, well, or you may not know how test generation happens, but it's they say the things you don't want to see are, legislation being made or a Wexler being made. So the WIMS will follow. It will be normed, co-normed with the WAIS-5, and we should have it next year.
Great. We did have a question about any other training that is included for free in the kit or that is available to customers that purchase the kit.
Yes. I'm not sure how they're going to do this. In the past, there has been a piece of paper in there with URLs that take you to that. The free training is introductory. As we said, there are modules, they're online, and they're in a piece of software called Brainshark. Some of you probably already have a Brainshark account because you've used the introductory training for some of our other products. If you don't, you'll be able to set up an account for yourself when you go in to begin the training. And yes, that's free.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we have time for just maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I saw there was a question or quite a few questions in here about that are very specific to the subtest. So I want to remind people that you can go in and register for the additional webinars that are as a part of this series, and we'll go into more detail on the subtests that are available for this. And then I guess one other question that had come in today is if you can also administer this just on paper or if you need to have digital administration options available.
I'm sorry, if you can just administer paper and pencil, or if you need to have digital?
Have the digital option in order to be able to score the assessment.
No, you can score by hand. And as I said, I've been around for a while, and one of my tricks with the Wexler was scoring it under the table while the child or the client was doing other things that kept their attention focused, like an achievement test. Much of it is easy to score by hand. However, to be honest, I would recommend digital scoring. It's faster, it saves you time, and it's also great in terms of quality assurance and making sure you don't make any errors.
Well, thank you so much, Gail. I think that's all the questions that we have time for today. We've gotten through quite a few of them. I know there's some additional questions that have come in, and we're trying to keep up the best that we can, but please do attend the following 3 webinars that are part of this series to get more questions and answers, and we'll definitely look forward to sharing more information. Thanks again, Gail, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.